Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Some people can lose their temper over little things, like the customer at the store where our OP worked. Well, let's see how this case ends up. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. That time we had to call the cops. I'm going to call Crazy Man CM, my coworker CW, and my manager M. So at the time I was working in a place that sells undergarments for both men and women. Men's was actually our best-selling department. The most important fact to know in this story is that boxers cost more than boxer briefs. Moving right along. You know how customers just love to pick things up and abandon them in the wrong place? Well, this time that ended up with a butterfly effect in which we needed to call the police and get security escorts to our cars at the end of the night due to an absolutely psychotic man not getting his way. We had both a wall lined with products for men as well as a couple of bins in the men's section for excess stock for customers to take what they needed. One of these bins contained boxer briefs. I'm sure you all know where this is going. A large red-headed man, like at least 6 foot and 250 pounds, muscular, walks up to CW's register with a pack of boxers and a pack of socks to get our BOGO 50% off promotion. This is CM. Coworker, who's a little old lady by the way, rings up his items and tells him his total. I'm on the register next to her, as it was a busy weekend day, so I can hear all of this. Not that I'd need to be that close. CM starts flipping out. Crazy Man, why is it so expensive? I didn't pick anything up that expensive. CW, well, the socks cost this much, and the boxers cost this much. So with the sale, that's what the total comes to. CM, no, the boxers cost less than that. I read the sign, they definitely cost less. CW, would you mind showing me where you picked these up, sir? CM brings her over to the boxer brief bin. CW, I'm sorry, sir, it looks like another customer put these in the wrong spot. Pointing to where the boxers are on the wall, they're actually this much. My manager was in the men's section and stopped what she was doing to listen in. CM, well, you had them in the wrong place, so you have to honor that price. CW, sir, I don't have control of where other customers leave things. There are no other boxers in this bin. They cost this much. If it was an error on our part, I would honor it, but it isn't. CM, you need to honor the price. CW, no, sir. I can remove the item if you aren't interested. CM, are you stupid? You need to do what I said. Manager intervenes. M, excuse me, sir, what seems to be the problem? CM, I found boxers here in this bin and your employee won't honor the price. M, I'm sorry, sir, it looks like a customer put them there. We cannot give you the boxers for the price of boxer briefs. CM, I have never been in a store that treats customers like this. You need to give me them at that price because that's where I found them. M, sir, I do not have the authority to change the prices. At this point, literally the entire store has stopped and is staring at a distance at this enraged linebacker of a man screaming. CM, yes, you do. You can change the price. Do it now. M, I can't do that, sir. CM, I ought to punch you in your smart mouth. M, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. CM, no, you're going to give me my boxers. He has his finger in her face. At the lower price, not your rip-off price. At this point, I left to call security, and apparently a couple of people had called police after the man threatened my manager. He's still screaming, but I can't tell what he's saying. The police department is only a few minutes down the street from the store, so by the time I was finished with security, the police were in the store and escorting the man who was still raging out. Security arrived maybe 5 minutes later and ended up escorting me and my manager to our cars after closing later, as people reported that he was threatening us all. In case you were wondering, this was all over $2.50. Maybe one store did honor it and a light bulb clicked. He put them in the bin himself, I'm sure. And our next story. Being an engineer is effing based when your management is incompetent. I'm a factory automation engineer with companies like Tesla on my resume. At my current factory job, shortly after I joined the company, I solved a problem that one of our processes had been having for literally the entire 20 years the factory has been standing, because my specific educational focus in engineering school was centered around exactly the kind of problem this process was having. I had the permission from my direct supervisor and production management to implement the fix for the specific factory line. The other lines were running well enough without it that I didn't feel it was necessary to apply it across the factory. It was just this one line that ran like crap for whatever reason, so I fixed the problem I saw. I did this for about 6 months and managed to fix problems with literally dozens of different processes across the factory. All the while, I had no idea that there was a rule determined by our corporate engineering manager that all factory processes had to run on the same set of control parameters and that we were forbidden from changing the parameters that I'd been running around changing. I didn't know this was a rule, and I never thought to consider that it might be a rule, because it's an absolutely stupid rule. Because process controls are supposed to be tuned individually to the equipment they're controlling. Every piece of industrial hardware is slightly different, even when the equipment is ostensibly identical. Without getting too technical, things like electric motors have subtle variations in the windings that make them respond differently to current flowing through them. Heating units have slightly different thermal mass and other properties that make them heat up a little faster or slower. The automated controls for those processes have to use slightly different control parameters to account for these subtle differences in equipment. But apparently this manager read about corporate standardization in a book somewhere and decided that every line across all of our factories needed to run the same controller constants. He had spent years in his own factory forcing his technicians to find a single set of parameters that worked across all his lines. Apparently, he managed to find a set of parameters that didn't cause the equipment to catch fire, so in his infinite wisdom, he'd spent the last 5 or 6 years shoving that mandate up the butt of all his technicians and subordinate engineers so that he could report to his bosses that he'd been putting the hammer down standardizing our processes. So in his eyes, I was effing up the whole factory by turning those controller constants to match the hardware they were running on. After trying to explain that's not how any of this works, and getting about as far as that old lady in the commercial, I acquiesced to the manager's very explicit and stern demands to put everything back exactly the way it was supposed to be. I barely managed to avoid being fired on the spot by apologizing profusely for my mistake because I didn't realize there was a standard in place. So when scrap and quality rejects at our factory doubled in a single week and we lost about 70 hours of uptime because of jammed up processes at a cost of about $10,000 an hour and lost productivity, there was suddenly a big meeting demanded by corporate to come yell at us for costing the company about $2 million in 1 week between all the increased scrap and downtime. At that meeting, I explained exactly the changes that I had been making to the processes over the course of the previous 6 months. I had charts from our historian for every single process before I made my original changes, after I made the changes, and after I was compelled under threat of losing my job to revert all the changes I made back to the original parameters. I got the opportunity to explain to the engineering manager's boss that homogenizing code and standardizing processes is a good idea on the whole, but that there are specific equipment parameters that need to be tuned individually for each process they're running on, and that these parameters often need to be retuned if something about the process changes in a way that affects the performance of that process, such as changes in materials or natural wear and tear on components. And I explained that while one factory was able to find a set of parameters that worked across all their lines without causing catastrophic failures, most of those lines were actually performing quite sluggishly, and I demonstrated using our own plant's data how similarly performing lines at our factory before my changes dramatically improved yield and uptime when the processes were tuned individually. The corporate engineering manager got fired, and I got 40% of my annual salary as a bonus this year, along with everyone at my plant getting maxed out bonuses because of how well the plant performed this year. There may be a dress code requiring shoes with laces, but they all don't have to be size 10. And our last story. Entitled jerk against the owner. Me, EJ, entitled jerk, and Mark, son of the owner. I work at a popular high-priced restaurant and we get new employees often, but the owner, who's also the general manager, hired some new faces and he put me in charge of them. I'm not a manager, and the actual managers that were working with me made it clear that they were putting the responsibility of EJ onto me. Immediately, I didn't like this EJ. He was unprofessional and rude, but when he found out he was older than me, all respect went out the window. I'm a rather short, chunky girl, and he belittled me on my weight as well as my age. EJ let other staff and guests know his opinions very aggressively. On to why he was fired. The owner of the restaurant next door is friends with the owner of the restaurant I work at. They're business partners and have corporate ties with each other. This is where Mark comes in. Mark is the son of the owner next door. Mark, his father, and my general manager are on poster in the back room. The family has owned restaurants for years. I know they're from overseas. I don't know where exactly, but I'm assuming Israel. Anyway, they have a thick accent, and sometimes it's hard to understand them the first try. Mark walked in, and I had a difficult time understanding his accent, and after a few minutes of trying to understand each other, we got his order in. EJ got annoyed listening to my conversation and started making comments like, "Learn English," and mumbling while making "ugh" sounds. Mark heard this and layered on his accent, making it even harder and playing it up while asking EJ questions about our food. EJ was notably PO'd and started yelling racist and anti-immigrant things at Mark. He ended his rant with, "If I was the owner, I'd ban all towelheads like you." Mark perked up and in almost perfect English with little detectable accent said, "I am the owner." EJ went off again, claiming how he was lying until he realized Mark was one of the co-owners. You'd expect an apology, right? One last-ditch effort to save your job? Not from EJ. He then claimed that it wasn't fair for Mark to be a co-owner because it was taking away jobs from Americans. Mark smiled very big and asked me to write a witness report while he called my general manager and his dad. The next day, EJ was gone, and I hopefully never have to deal with him again. Love the double down. If he's the owner of a business, he's likely creating jobs for Americans rather than taking away jobs. Good logic by your boy there. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.